but I have to do that.
Go to slideshow, Dawn.
Yeah, I always have trouble seeing this. That's why I was trying to get him to help me with it.
So stay on PC.
Sorry, I got it in the wrong spot. I got the wrong glasses on my computer. I got my glasses on so I can see all of you guys. Technical support.
I will.
Great. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you today about milestones of success, the return of Lake Sturgeon to the Genesee River. You can see some of my authors there. There are many other authors who end up on other publications, and you know who you are if you're out here. So, but we're going to go on with that. Here we go. So, Lake Sturgeon restoration. We initiated a Lake Sturgeon restoration experiment in the Genesee River. And the question, the first question you ask is, why did we do Lake Sturgeon in the Genesee River? Why target? So the Genesee River historically was an extremely productive Lake Sturgeon spawning tributary, and Seth Green himself caught giant sturgeon there in the 1860s and 1880s. So that this is a target of high importance, and no sturgeon were seen there well before the 1930s, and management by 2000 had listed them as extirpated from that population, and it was Doug Carlson who said that, so you can go with that. Also, many of you are aware that Rochester embayment is an area of concern. It is one of the focus areas of concern that had been designated as highly degraded. So there was efforts to rehabilitate these areas of concern. And one of the things they said for the Rochester area of concern for success is that lake sturgeon of different life stages inhabit the Genesee River up to the lower falls and in the embayment, or they weren't confident they could actually get sturgeon in here at this point, lower or physical and biological habitats that are suitable for all life stages of sturgeon. So, in 1999, we got together as a multi-agency group to we initiated a collaborative research to test the suitability of restoration actions focused on returning lake sturgeon to the Genesee River. So what we did, and what I did mostly with my various companions, we did multi-year fish and habitat sampling to determine if the habitat was suitable, and also to see if there were actually a remnant population of lake sturgeon, which had turned out to be in some other cases that they were there. Habitat sampling included benthic macroinvertebrates because in a large predator you need to know that their food is there. So what we found in this initial stage of this study was we captured no lake sturgeon, 1999 to 2003. We caught a whole lot of carp, but nothing else, not much else, because we were using large mesh gill nets. When all the habitat and fish data are fed into the sturgeon habitat suitability model, what we found was that the juvenile habitat is very good in the lower Genesee. I should mention the lower Genesee is about a 10-kilometer section of river to give you scale here. Oh, I have the kilometer numbers on there. And then in looking at the substrate, and this goes back to understanding if at any time there might be spawning sturgeon in this river, the hardness index, and you can see up by the lower falls, that little picture there is the lower falls, which is the first natural barrier, 110 foot tall. So it, not quite as tall as the Niagara Falls, but it definitely keeps sturgeon in the lower falls. So we have hard substrate in the 2 kilometers that are downstream of the falls. So we said, okay. The group got together and said, okay, this looks fine, and you know what we can do, we could start this experiment. So one of the tools that we're testing is release of hatchery-reared sturgeon to supplement a local population. Renewal of local populations is an important part of any large lake metapopulation. So the goal is to bring in another local population. So you can see there through the middle, you can show some of our, in 2004, our egg tape team that we had up at Messina. So the adult sturgeon is below the Moses Saunders Dam, and catch the sturgeon, get the eggs, take them to the Oneida hatchery, rear them up, and then in September they become large enough, and we all go out as a group, Fish and Wildlife, DEC, USGS, and take them to the Genesee and release them at the furthest upstream site that has suitable juvenile sturgeon habitat, which is just below Seth Green Island. And you can see there the small fish. So in 2003 and 2004, we released a total of 1,900 sturgeon. So you go into an experiment like this and you say, okay, what is my best case scenario? Okay, the Genesee was actually suitable for age 0 sturgeon. We put them in and they just didn't all die. That was the first thing. Lake sturgeon are present, continue to be present, and biological measures are good. So basically, you know, growth and health index, index of condition, that kind of thing. The next milestone would be the pattern of released sturgeon habitat use is consistent with the species use of tributaries to large lakes, which is use of a nursery habitat for some number of years, movement out into the lake, the large lake, and then at maturity they would move back in to use the spawning habitat. Return of mature males at 8 to 13 years old. First mature male could have shown up in 2012. Return of mature females at age 17 to 22 years old. So the first mature female could have showed up in 2020. And then, of course, the ultimate goal for a self-sustaining population is naturally reproduced juveniles. So I'm not going to bury the lead on my story here. We're going to jump to the milestone for 2020 and 2022. In those years, we reached 2 key milestones for this population. In May of 2021, 18 years after the initial release of hatchery-reared juveniles, we caught the first adult female with eggs. And we had a party on the boat. So, and there were 8 males that we captured with her. They were within a half a kilometer of the likely spawning habitat. This female was released as a fingerling in 2003. I don't have a picture of her specifically from that time, but she was there. When we caught her, she weighed 31 kilograms and was 1.55 meters long at capture. Based on Wisconsin estimates of fecundity, she would have contained 330,000 eggs approximately coming in to spawn in the Genesee in 2021. So we're like, oh, really happy about that. In May of 2022, this past May, we managed to capture 3 adult females and 9 males in the Genesee. And you can see our largest female we caught there, she was 44 kilograms, which is 500,000 eggs potentially being brought into this new spawning population in the Genesee. So that's having first reproduction in a reintroduced population is a huge milestone for a project like this. Second milestone that we reached in 2021 and 2022, we do an intensive juvenile sturgeon population sampling to follow the stocked sturgeon. But coming along with that, we would also catch any naturally produced sturgeon. In September of 2021, we caught 2 unmarked 1-year-olds, which were the 2020 year class. So even though we didn't catch a female in 2020, they were there. And part of that was, as you probably could be speculating, is we got barely any field work in 2020. I had to write 5-page essays about why I had to go out and do field work in COVID. So, so it was not surprising we didn't actually catch a female that year. So then you say, okay, that's the first 1 year. Then in this September, in September 2022, we caught 2 unmarked 1-year-olds, which would be the 2021 year class, and one of the same 2020 year class. Now I just should mention, I should have mentioned this, it's on the slide. At the hatchery, we skewed mark every one of these fish. That's the largest mark. We pit tagged them, and then in the younger year classes, which are after 2013, I'll talk about that in the next slide, they were all coated wire tag. So there's a very, very small probability that these are hatchery fish that lost all of their tags. So as milestones go for a recovering population or reintroduced population, the Lake Sturgeon Recovery Plan for a local population, and Lisa Holtz can correct me if I am misstating this, it's 3 years of naturally reproduced year classes in a given local population. So, we need another one, basically, to say, okay, we've reached the metrics of the Lake Sturgeon Recovery Plan for this local population. So what I'm saying here is, given that we had 3 adult females, one of them that had 500,000 eggs, that I caught, obviously, there's other ones out there that you didn't get into your gill net. I'm going to say that we may reach this metric in 2023. Hopefully. Yes. All right, so that's the headline of the milestones. But now I'm going to run you through a couple of the previous milestones that we had in this project. The first milestone was immediately in 2004. Is the Genesee suitable for age 0 lake sturgeon? So I was getting, all of a sudden, we get this project going, and I suddenly get all this feedback from the EPA and all these other people about other projects that had stocked sturgeon, and they said, we never saw them again. We put them in, we never saw them again. So we got really worried. But in May of 2004, my technician is holding it there. That's the first one we caught. So we let him go in September of 2003, over the winter, May of 2004. I was so excited that I almost threw him out of the boat. He teased me for years about almost knocking him out of the boat. So that was exciting. That summer, we recaptured, of that 2003 fish that we stocked, we captured 167 juvenile sturgeon, which, at that point it's like, at that point I thought, well, this project's actually going to work, maybe. So the next metric, which I'm sure you've all been looking at already, is return of mature males at 9 to 13 years old. So what we ended up catching is, in each year, not right away, not when you would have thought maybe they'd show up in 2012. But in 2016 and every year after that, we caught 3 to 4 adult males, and they were 7 to 17 kilograms. They were near the identified suitable spawning habitat, and they were there during the best physical conditions for lake sturgeon spawning. And, you know, we caught them, we weighed them, we checked to see if they were ripe, all of that. So they were there by themselves, because at that point, you know, they're looking for the females and they aren't there yet. But as you saw in my previous few slides, that they did show up in 2020. We just didn't, finally, the mating congregations were able to get together. Another metric of success is patterns of habitat use. So what you're seeing here on this slide is catch per unit effort at age. So catch per unit effort, number of fish per net, per night, versus how old they were. And you can see that they stay in the river for 4 to 6 years at pretty high numbers. I mean, we're getting 1 fish per net, and you know, in these long-term surveys of sturgeon, it's 1 fish per 10 nets or 1 fish per 100 nets that they're getting in a lot of these kinds of assessments. So, you know, we're doing well with those numbers. And then the picture there is a picture of inside the breakwall at the Genesee River versus Lake Ontario in the outside. So then, you know, the declining catch includes both mortality and emigration. And given what other sturgeon do in other systems, fair amount of emigration. Now there are 2 things to talk about here. 1,900 sturgeon will not recover a local population. So when we get to the 10th year of this project, which was 2013, other forces and planning had gone into effect. So a recovery plan was put in place by the New York DEC, initiating 10 years of stocking to bring the population numbers up. So we have released in the Genesee an additional 10,500 fish, which we have to do some modeling to determine whether, given all the rates of mortality and movement that we're seeing, that will eventually build up what would be considered a stable, sustainable population. So then, Greg already mentioned this a little bit. I just wanted to touch base a little bit on, then we added telemetry to this. So what we did was both looking at age 0 fish in 2019, and yeah, am I out of time already? Oh, another minute. Okay, just quickly. So the fish move in and out of the Genesee, basically, and we got some pretty hard numbers, and that was Kyle Morton's master's thesis. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about quickly was those females and males that we tagged this spring. So what we caught them in May, tagged them with telemetry. After we tagged them, they went up to the spawning spot in the Genesee. Then they moved out of the Genesee into the embayment. And for that other project, we have these gates of telemetry receivers. They hit, all 12 of them, hit every single gate going to the Niagara. And they hung around in the Niagara, and surprisingly, since they already supposedly spawned in the Genesee, they went up to the Niagara, to where Dimitri thinks they spawn in the Niagara. We will continue this research over the next couple of years. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's helped me with this project, and I may not have any time for questions.